The alien captain took a human hostage. Now they're stranded together on a forbidden world. Derek Ashton was cataloging cave fungi when the wall exploded inward. The blast wave threw him across the laboratory, scattering samples and sending his datapad into darkness. His ears rang. Smoke choked the air. Through settling dust, armored figures poured through the breach, weapons raised, moving with predatory precision. "Station Helix 9, you are under military seizure," a voice cut through emergency channels. Derek's hands found a workstation edge. He pulled himself up, and that's when he saw her. She stood in the ruined lab center, taller than any human, white and blue fur catching emergency lighting. Pointed ears swiveled toward every sound. Her tail moved in slow, controlled arcs behind form-fitting armor. Amber eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his survival instincts scream. "That one," she said. Two soldiers grabbed Derek's arms. They hauled him upright. The captain approached with fluid grace, each step deliberate. She stopped close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her fur. "Dr. Derek Ashton," she said, reading from a data screen. "Xenobiologist, 3 years studying extremophile organisms." "That's me," Derek managed. "You're making a mistake." "We rarely do." She reached out, clawed fingers gentle as they tilted his chin up. She studied his face like he'd studied specimens, clinical and thorough. "You will come with us. You will answer questions. If you cooperate, you will not be harmed. And if I don't," her lips pulled back slightly, revealing sharp canines, "then you will answer questions and be harmed." They dragged him through corridors where scientists huddled under guard. Emergency klaxons wailed. The Kethari moved with practiced efficiency, stripping data cores, collecting personnel. They'd known exactly what they wanted. A Kethari assault ship dominated the hangar. They forced Derek up the ramp through corridors that smelled like copper and cinnamon. They threw him into a small room with a single bolted chair. The captain entered alone, the door sealing with a hiss. "Sit," she commanded. Derek sat. She circled him slowly, tail moving in hypnotic patterns. "Commander Haskell," she said. "You know this name?" "No." "Sector 7, the Margrave Cluster, a weapons facility." Derek's stomach sank. He'd heard whispers about illegal bioweapon research. "I study fungi," he said carefully. "I don't know anything about weapons." "Your station received encrypted transmissions from Sector 7. Your colleague corresponded with their lead researcher." "I catalog organisms, that's it, whatever you think." An explosion rocked the ship. The captain's head snapped up, ears flattening. Red emergency lighting flooded the room. Her hand went to her weapon as the door opened and Lieutenant Torres burst in. "Captain, we're under attack. 3 ships, unknown configuration, shields at 60%. Another impact. The captain's tail lashed once. "Get us out of here," she ordered. "Engage emergency jump protocols." "Captain, we're still docked." "I gave you an order." Torres disappeared. The captain grabbed Derek's arm and hauled him up. Her grip was iron strong. "Move." They ran through tilting corridors. Crew members rushed past shouting. Something exploded nearby. The captain never slowed, dragging Derek with single-minded determination. They reached an escape pod bay. Half the pods were gone. She yanked open the nearest hatch and shoved him inside. "Captain," Torres's voice crackled over comms. "Starboard hull breach. We're losing..." "Static." The captain's ears flattened completely. For just a moment, Derek saw something raw cross her face. Then her expression locked into iron control. She climbed in and slammed the hatch. Derek barely secured the harness before she launched. The pod shot from the dying ship. Through the viewport, Derek glimpsed the Kethari vessel breaking apart. Then they were tumbling, the planet rushing up too fast. "Stabilizers aren't responding," the captain said. "Atmospheric entry in 30 seconds. The pod shook. Heat built rapidly. The captain worked controls with fierce concentration, muscles taut beneath her fur. The instrument screamed warnings. "Brace." The viewport filled with green, thick jungle canopy. They hit. Impact drove air from Derek's lungs. Metal shrieked. Something sharp caught his shoulder, tearing through fabric and skin. The pod tumbled, crashed through vegetation, slammed into something solid. Then, stillness. broken only by hissing atmosphere and ticking metal. Derek hung in the harness, vision swimming, his shoulder burned, blood ran warm down his arm. He fumbled with the release, dropped hard to what was now the pod's sidewall. The captain lay crumpled in her seat, one leg bent wrong. Blood matted the white fur of her shoulder, but her chest rose and fell. He pulled himself up and checked her pulse. Strong, steady, faster than human, but regular. He found the medical kit, treated his shoulder with shaking hands, then examined her injuries. Broken leg, dislocated shoulder, contusions, painful but survivable. He was setting her leg when her eyes snapped open. She grabbed his wrist instantly, claws digging in, her pupils were slits in amber fury. Then recognition dawned. "What are you doing?" "Treating your injuries," Derek said. "You're welcome." She looked at her splinted leg, at the bandages. Her grip loosened but didn't release. "Where are we?" Derek gestured at the viewport, at alien jungle beyond cracked transparisteel. "Your guess is as good as mine." The captain pulled up the pod's navigation display. Her face went still. The fur along her spine rose. "No," she whispered. Derek felt cold spread through his chest. "What? Where are we?" She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw something new. Fear. "Sanctuary 7, she said. "The quarantine world. This planet was used as a biological weapons testing ground. The atmosphere is toxic to most species. The flora and fauna are hostile." She drew a ragged breath. "And the native spores are lethal to Kethari." Derek stared as understanding dawned, her labored breathing, the way she kept swallowing, the tremor in her hands. "How long?" "Days," she said. "Maybe a week." She released his wrist and pulled herself up, teeth gritted. "So you will help me repair communications and call for rescue." Derek almost laughed. "You're not hearing me, Captain. You need me to survive." Her ears flattened, her tail lashed. "I could still kill you." "You could," Derek agreed. "But then you'd die alone." They stared at each other while alien sounds filtered through the hull. Finally, her shoulders dropped. "What do you want?" "Freedom of movement, access to supplies, and you stop treating me like a prisoner." The muscle in her jaw worked. Pride versus pragmatism, control versus survival. "Agreed," she finally said. Derek extended his hand. She looked at it before reaching out, her clawed hand engulfing his. "I'm Captain Syra Velrith," she said. "And you, Dr. Ashton, just became the most valuable human in the galaxy." Outside the pod, something screamed in the jungle. Derek met her amber eyes and saw his own fear reflected back. They were stranded on a death world, and survival would require trusting the enemy who'd taken him hostage. He looked at their joined hands, human and alien, captor and captive. The rules had changed. Out here they were equals, or they were both dead. Derek woke to the sound of Syra's labored breathing. Dawn light filtered through the cracked viewport, painting the pod's interior in shades of green and gold. He'd slept sitting up, back against the bulkhead, every muscle stiff from the crash. Syra hadn't moved from where she'd finally passed out around midnight, her injured leg elevated on salvaged cushioning. But her breathing was wrong, too fast, too shallow. He crawled over carefully, avoiding debris. Her fur was damp with sweat, ears twitching even in sleep. He pressed fingers to her throat, counting her pulse, elevated. Her skin felt hot through the fur. "Captain," he said quietly. Her eyes opened immediately, pupils dilating as they found him. For a second, her hand moved toward where her weapon should be. Then awareness returned. "How long was I out?" 6 hours, maybe 7. Derek sat back on his heels. "How do you feel?" "Like I crashed on a death world." She pushed herself up with a grimace, testing her splinted leg. "The spores?" "Already working. I can feel it in my lungs." Derek pulled the medical kit closer and inventoried what they had. 2 respirator filters designed for Kethari physiology, a week's worth of broad-spectrum antihistamines, painkillers, wound sealant, antiseptic, not nearly enough. "The filters will help," he said, holding one up. "But they're not designed for prolonged exposure to spores. We need to find shelter, somewhere sealed, while I figure out a treatment." "Treatment?" Syra's ears flicked forward. "You're a fungus expert, not a physician." "I study how organisms adapt to hostile environments. Your body is treating the spores as an allergen, attacking them, which causes the damage. If I can find something to suppress that response, or better yet, help your body recognize them as neutral. You're speculating. I'm problem-solving, Derek corrected, which is more than you can do from inside this pod. She stared at him for a long moment, tail swishing slowly. Then she reached for the respirator and fitted it over her muzzle. The clear mask fogged with each breath. Fine, but I lead. You stay close, and if I tell you to run, you run. You can barely walk. I can still shoot. She pulled a sidearm from a storage compartment, checked the charge. And I've survived worse than a broken leg. Derek didn't argue. He gathered what supplies he could carry in a salvaged pack while Syra examined the pod's exterior through the viewport. Her ears kept swiveling, tracking sounds he couldn't hear. There, she said, pointing through the canopy. Rock formation, maybe 200 meters, natural shelter. You can make 200 meters on that leg. She shot him a look that could have stripped paint. Watch me. The pod's hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss. Humid air rolled in, thick and sweet, carrying scents Derek couldn't identify. The jungle beyond was a riot of colors, purple vines thick as his arm, trees with bark that seemed to pulse faintly, flowers that turned to track their movement. Beautiful, deadly. Syra went first, weapon raised, moving with a pronounced limp, but never slowing. Derek followed, scanning the undergrowth with his trained eye. Everything here had evolved in competition, every plant armed with thorns or toxins or both. They'd gone maybe 50 meters when Syra's ears flattened. Down, she hissed. Derek dropped. Through the vegetation ahead, something massive moved between the trees, four-legged, covered in overlapping plates like living armor, head low to the ground. It hadn't seen them, yet. Syra's hand found Derek's shoulder, claws pricking through his shirt. She pulled him slowly backward, one careful step at a time. The creature snuffled at the ground where they'd been standing, then moved on. When they could no longer hear it, Syra released him. Terraback, she said quietly. Herbivore, mostly, but territorial. Those plates can shear through steel. How do you know the wildlife here? Kethari military briefs on quarantine worlds, in case we ever need to. She trailed off, then shook her head. Doesn't matter now. They continued in silence. Derek noticed she was breathing harder, each step requiring more effort. Twice she stumbled, catching herself on trees. Pride kept her from accepting his offered arm. The rock formation rose from the jungle like a broken tooth. Erosion had carved chambers into the stone, deep enough to provide shelter, high enough to offer a vantage point. Syra climbed with grim determination, pulling herself up with her arms when her leg wouldn't cooperate. Inside, the largest chamber was dry and relatively clean. Old scorch marks on the walls suggested someone had used it before, long ago. Syra collapsed against the far wall, chest heaving. She pulled off the respirator with shaking hands. Her eyes were bloodshot. Tell me you have a plan, she said. Derek was already unpacking supplies, his mind racing through what he knew about allergic responses, about fungal biology, about Kethari physiology from the research papers he'd read. I need samples, he said, of the spores of the local flora. If I can identify what's causing the reaction, I can potentially synthesize something to counteract it. With what equipment? The pod's medical bay has a basic analysis suite, and I've worked with less. He moved to the chamber entrance, studying the surrounding jungle. A cluster of mushrooms grew on a nearby tree, their caps releasing visible puffs of spores with each gust of wind. Perfect. I'll be right back. Derek, her voice stopped him. Don't be stupid. I'll be careful. He used a sample container from the medical kit, approaching the mushrooms slowly. The spores were dense here, visible in the slanting sunlight. He collected several samples, sealed the containers, then gathered leaves and bark from different species. When he returned, Syra had her weapon trained on the entrance. She lowered it when she saw him, relief flickering across her face before she could hide it. Got what you need? It's a start. He settled beside her, pulling out the medical scanner. It was designed for field diagnostics, basic but functional. He activated it, running the first spore sample through analysis. The results made him frown. "What?" Syra asked. "These spores aren't natural. I mean, they're organic, but the structure is too perfect. Someone engineered these." "The bioweapons program." "Must be." Derek ran another scan, his mind working. "But that's actually good news. Engineered organisms often have exploitable weaknesses. If I can find the right enzyme, the right chemical compound." He worked while she watched, her breathing gradually steadying. The respirator helped, but it was a temporary measure. He could see the fatigue in the set of her shoulders, the way her tail barely moved. Hours passed. The scanner beeped, presenting data. Derek cross-referenced it with the medical database, searching for anything that might work. "There," he said finally. "This compound, derived from those purple vines, in theory it should bind to the spore proteins and prevent your immune system from recognizing them as threats." "In theory?" "In theory," Derek admitted. "I won't know until I synthesize it and test it." "Test it how?" "On you." Syra's ears flicked back. Then, to his surprise, she laughed. It was a rough sound, almost painful. "Of course, why not?" She met his eyes. "Do it. We're out of better options." Derek nodded and got to work. He used the medical kit's synthesizer, normally meant for producing simple medications. The process was delicate, required precision he wasn't sure he had. But he'd spent years studying extremophiles, understanding how organisms survived impossible conditions. This was just another puzzle, and Syra's life depended on getting it right. The synthesizer chimed. Derek drew the resulting compound into an injector, held it up to the light, clear, slightly viscous. "This might hurt," he warned. "Everything hurts," Syra extended her arm. "Just do it." He administered the injection, watching her carefully for any adverse reaction. Her jaw tightened, claws digging into her thigh, but she made no sound. They waited. Minutes crawled past. Derek monitored her vitals with the scanner, watching for changes. Her heart rate stayed elevated. Her temperature didn't drop. Then, gradually, her breathing eased. The scanner showed her immune response declining, the inflammation in her lungs reducing. "It's working," Derek said. Syra closed her eyes, ears relaxing slightly. "How long will it last?" "I don't know. 12 hours? Maybe 24? I'll need to keep administering doses until we find rescue." She opened her eyes and looked at him. Really looked at him, like she was seeing something unexpected. "You saved my life. We're not out of this yet." Still, her tail moved, brushing against his leg. "Thank you." The words felt strange coming from her. Derek realized this might be the first time she'd thanked anyone for anything in a long time. Outside, the jungle grew darker as evening approached. Strange calls echoed through the trees. They were alone on a hostile world, two beings from species that barely trusted each other. But right now, in this moment, they were alive, and that was enough. 3 days on Sanctuary 7 had taught Derek that survival was measured in small victories. Syra could walk without limping. The treatment held her symptoms at bay, though he had to administer it twice daily. They'd established a perimeter around the rock shelter, marking dangerous plants and safe paths. Small victories that kept them breathing. But water was running low. Derek stood at the chamber entrance, watching rain hammer the jungle canopy. Not the toxic downpours Syra had warned about. Those turned the air caustic and sent them scrambling for the pod's sealed interior. This was ordinary rain, almost Earth-like, and their containers could only catch so much from the runoff. "There's a stream," Syra said from behind him. "Half a kilometer east. I spotted it from the ridge yesterday." Derek turned. She was checking her weapon, the movement automatic after years of military discipline. "You didn't mention it. I was waiting to see if the treatment would hold." She looked up, amber eyes steady. "It has. We can make the trip." They set out at midday when the jungle was brightest. Syra moved with her old predatory grace, though Derek noticed she favored her formerly broken leg on uneven ground. He carried the empty containers, eyes scanning constantly for threats. The jungle had a rhythm he was learning to read. The rustle of small creatures in the canopy, the warning clicks certain plants made when approached, the peculiar stillness that preceded something dangerous. Right now, everything felt wrong, he said quietly. She'd already frozen, ears swiveling. Her hand moved to her weapon. The creature that emerged from the undergrowth was nothing like the herbivore they'd avoided before. Lean, six-legged, covered in mottled green scales that made it nearly invisible among the vegetation. Its head was all forward-facing eyes and teeth. "Ripper," Syra breathed. "Apex predator, don't run." It circled them slowly, analyzing, deciding. Derek's heart hammered. He'd faced dangerous animals before in his fieldwork, but never anything that looked at him with such obvious intelligence. Syra raised her weapon, the Ripper's muscles bunched. She fired. The shot caught it in the shoulder, spinning it sideways. It screamed, a sound that made Derek's bones ache, and charged. Syra fired again, each shot precise despite her injury. The Ripper collapsed 3 meters away, twitching. "Move," Syra commanded. They ran. Behind them, more screams echoed through the jungle. Pack hunters. Syra's hand found Derek's, pulling him forward with strength that surprised him. They crashed through vegetation, branches whipping past. The stream appeared ahead, cutting through a rocky clearing. "Across!" Syra pushed him toward the water. "They won't follow into open ground." Derek splashed through knee-deep current, Syra right behind. They scrambled up the far bank and turned. 6 Rippers had emerged at the stream's edge. They paced, snarling, but wouldn't cross. Territorial boundaries, Derek realized. The stream marked hunting grounds. Syra kept her weapon raised until the pack finally withdrew. Then her legs gave out. Derek caught her before she hit the ground. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice shook. "Just the adrenaline." "Sure." Derek helped her to a flat rock, checked her over for injuries. "You're bleeding." A branch had torn through her armor, leaving a gash along her ribs. Not deep, but it needed treatment. He pulled antiseptic from his pack. "This will sting." "Everything stings," she said, echoing her words from days ago. But when he cleaned the wound, her claws dug into the rock. Derek worked carefully, conscious of how close he was, how his hands touched fur and skin. She smelled like rain and something else, something distinctly alien but not unpleasant. When he sealed the wound, his fingers lingered a moment too long. Syra's eyes met his, her pupils dilated. "We should fill the containers," she said. "Right, yes." They worked in silence, the moment broken but not forgotten. Derek tried to focus on the task, on the cool water, on anything but the way she'd looked at him. When the containers were full, Syra stood surveying the clearing. "We should scout ahead," she said. "There might be shelter closer to the water source. Or we could head back before dark." "Derek," she turned to him. "I've been thinking, we're treating symptoms, but we need extraction, and my pod's communications are fried." "I know, but there might be another option." She pointed beyond the stream, where the jungle thinned slightly. "I've seen structures on the horizon. Could be old research stations from when this planet was active. Could be dangerous." "Everything here is dangerous," her tail swished. "But if there's functioning equipment, we could call for help." Derek studied the distant shapes barely visible through the canopy. It made sense. The planet had been used for weapons testing, which meant infrastructure. Labs, communication arrays. How far? A day's trek, maybe 2. "And you think you can make it?" Her ears flattened. "I've led missions through worse with broken bones and failing gear. I can handle a jungle hike." "That wasn't what I asked." They stared at each other. Derek saw the struggle in her face. Pride warring with pragmatism. The need to appear strong against the reality of her vulnerability. "I don't know," she finally admitted. "But staying here means waiting for rescue that might never come. My government thinks I'm dead. Yours doesn't know you're here. We're on our own." She was right, and Derek knew it. Still, the thought of pushing deeper into hostile territory with her condition uncertain made his stomach tight. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll scout the approach, see what we're dealing with, then decide." Syra nodded. Something in her expression softened. "You're cautious. It's frustrating but practical." "I'm a scientist. We like being sure." "I'm a soldier. We rarely have that luxury." They made the return journey as dusk painted the jungle in shades of purple and gold. No Rippers appeared, but Derek felt eyes watching from the shadows. The jungle was always watching. Back at the shelter, Derek prepared the evening treatment while Syra studied maps on her damaged data pad. "Come here," he said. She approached, and he administered the injection with practiced ease. But this time, when he withdrew the injector, her hand caught his wrist. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Doing what?" "Helping me, keeping me alive. I took you hostage, Derek, destroyed your life's work, got you stranded on a death world." Her grip tightened slightly. Most humans would let me die out here." Derek met her amber eyes. "Most Kethari would have killed me the moment I became inconvenient." "That's different." "Is it?" He didn't pull away. "You could have left me in that pod. You could have run when the Rippers attacked. But you didn't. Military discipline, you were an asset." "That's what you tell yourself?" Her ears flattened, but she didn't release him. They were close enough that Derek could see the subtle patterns in her fur, the way her breathing had quickened. "I don't know what I tell myself anymore," she said quietly. "Everything I believed about duty, about following orders, about humans being," she trailed off. "Being what?" Lesser, weak, clever, but ultimately inferior. Her thumb moved against his wrist, almost a caress. "You've kept me alive. You've adapted to this hellscape better than I have. And now you're risking your life to find rescue when you could try to reach that beacon yourself. Leave me here." "I wouldn't do that." "I know," she leaned closer. "That's what terrifies me." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Derek's free hand moved almost of its own accord, touching her shoulder where fur met armor. A sound outside shattered the tension, something large moving through the undergrowth. Syra released him instantly, weapon drawn, ears swiveling to track the threat. They waited in silence as the creature, whatever it was, passed by their shelter and continued into the jungle. When it was gone, the moment was gone with it. "Get some rest," Syra said, holstering her weapon. "Tomorrow we scout the structures." Derek nodded, knowing neither of them would sleep easily. Something had shifted between them, subtle but irreversible. The lines between captor and captive, soldier and scientist, alien and human were blurring. Outside, the jungle sang its night songs. Inside, two beings from different worlds tried to ignore the heat building between them. Tomorrow they would search for rescue. Tonight they pretended not to notice how close they sat, how their hands nearly touched in the darkness. Small victories, and one very dangerous complication. The structures rose from the jungle like monuments to abandonment. Derek and Syra stood at the tree line, studying what had once been a research complex. 3 buildings connected by covered walkways, all showing decades of decay. Vines had claimed the walls, windows gaped like empty eyes. "Kethari Construction," Syra said, reading faded markings. "Military Science Division, closed 40 years ago. Think there's anything still functional?" Only one way to find out. They'd left at dawn, making better time than Derek expected. Syra moved with confidence now, the treatment holding strong. But he'd caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, something uncertain in her expression. The kiss that almost happened 2 nights ago hung between them, unspoken. They approached the main building cautiously. The door had rusted open. Inside, emergency lighting still functioned, casting everything in sickly yellow. Dust covered every surface. Equipment lay scattered. Overturned chairs, broken screens, papers turned to mulch. "They left in a hurry," Derek observed. Syra knelt by a workstation, wiping grime from a terminal. She pressed the activation panel. Nothing. Tried another. The screen flickered, died, then stabilized. System still running on backup power. Derek moved to her side as she navigated the interface. His shoulder brushed hers, and neither pulled away. "Communications hub should be in the central building," Syra said, pulling up facility maps. The terminal chimed, new data scrolled across the screen. "What is that?" Derek asked. Syra's ears flattened as she read. "Mission logs. From when this place was operational," her voice went cold. "They were developing respiratory bioweapons, testing them on prisoners." Derek's stomach turned. The clinical language couldn't hide what they described. Systematic experimentation, calculated suffering. "This is what my government does," Syra said quietly. "This is what I served. You didn't know. Does that matter? She looked at him, and Derek saw something breaking behind her eyes. I took an oath to protect the Kethari expanse, to follow orders without question, and all the while, they were doing this. Derek placed his hand over hers on the console. You're not responsible for their crimes? Aren't I? I enforced their will, raided stations, took prisoners. Her claws extended slightly. How many people did I hurt for a government that does this? She pulled away, standing abruptly. Let's check communications. That's why we're here. They moved through decaying corridors to the central building. The walkway between structures had partially collapsed, forcing them to climb over debris. Derek went first, testing each handhold. When he reached the other side, he turned to help Syra across. She hesitated, then took his hand. The communications room was larger than Derek expected, filled with equipment that hummed with residual power. Syra moved to the main console, her military training evident in how quickly she assessed the systems. Most of it's dead, she said, but the primary array is functional. I can send a distress signal. To who? She stopped, fingers hovering over the controls. That's the question. My government would send ships immediately, rescue me, probably execute you, definitely send teams to retrieve everything here. She gestured at the surrounding equipment. All this data, all these weapons. Derek felt cold realization spreading through him. They knew, your government knew, this facility was here. Of course they did, Syra's tail lashed once. They sent me to die here, Derek, not to investigate rumors, to recover data from their own weapons research. I was always expendable. She turned to face him fully. If I call for rescue, I'm giving them exactly what they want. That's the choice. Derek moved closer, seeing the war playing across her features. So don't call them, he said. Her ears flicked forward in surprise. You're saying we should stay here? I'm saying we find another option. Your government isn't the only faction with ships. Derek gestured at the console. Can you send a message to neutral parties, science vessels, trade ships, anyone who'd come without claiming salvage rights? Maybe. It would take time to encode properly. She studied him. You realize this makes us both fugitives? My government will declare me a traitor. I'm already stranded on a quarantine world with an alien who kidnapped me. I think my reputation's shot. Syra laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. Then her expression shifted into something more vulnerable. Why do you keep choosing this, choosing to help me even when it costs you everything? Derek reached out, his hand finding hers. Because you're not them. You're not your government's crimes. You're Syra, and you've saved my life as many times as I've saved yours. She looked at their joined hands. When her eyes lifted to his face, something had changed in them. There's a neutral station, she said. 3 systems from here. They help refugees, people fleeing governments that want them dead. If anyone would come without ulterior motives, it's them. Then that's who we call. They worked together, crafting the message. Syra handled the technical aspects while Derek composed the plea. 2 scientists stranded on Sanctuary 7, requesting extraction, offering data that could prevent future weapons development in exchange for safe passage. Ready? Syra asked, finger hovering over the send command. Derek nodded. She pressed it. The console chimed. Message sent. Could take days for a response, Syra said. Weeks even? Derek kissed her. It wasn't planned. He just moved, closing the distance, his hand cupping her face as his lips found hers. She froze for a heartbeat. Then her hands gripped his shoulders, claws pricking through fabric, and she kissed him back with an intensity that stole his breath. She tasted alien and familiar at once. Her fur was soft against his palm. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her pupils were blown wide. Derek, she said, and his name in her mouth was almost reverent. That was against every regulation either of our governments has. I was going to say overdue. Her thumb traced his jawline, careful with her claws. He should step back, should remember all the reasons this was complicated. Instead, he pulled her closer, felt her tail wrap around his leg as her forehead pressed to his. We just made ourselves fugitives, she said. Seems like a good time for bad decisions. She laughed against his mouth, then kissed him again. Slower, deeper, exploratory. Derek's hands moved to her waist, feeling lean muscle beneath fur and armor. She made a sound low in her throat. The communications console blinked. Incoming message. Syra read it, then looked at Derek with wide eyes. They're coming, a refugee ship, 3 days out, she hesitated. But they want all research data from this facility, everything about the bioweapons program. Your government won't like that? My government can burn. The words came out fierce. She started the data transfer, downloading decades of classified information, evidence of crimes, proof of atrocities. Derek watched her work, seeing the soldier transform into something else, someone choosing her own path. When the download finished, Syra turned to him. Her hand found his face, claws gentle against his skin. 3 days, she said softly. 3 days until pickup. We should head back, prepare for extraction. We should, Derek agreed. But neither moved. Syra's tail wrapped tighter around his leg, her other hand slid to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. Or, she said, voice dropping lower, we could stay here tonight. The facility has shelter, resources, and I've been thinking about kissing you again for the last 2 days. Only 2 days? Don't push your luck, human. But she was smiling when she kissed him, and Derek stopped counting time altogether. They found quarters that were mostly intact, a room with a door that sealed, and a surface that wasn't covered in decades of decay. Syra's armor came off in pieces, revealing the lean predator beneath. Derek's hands explored carefully, learning where fur gave way to skin, where she was sensitive, where touch made her breath catch. Her claws were gentle against him, mapping his body with the same curiosity. When they finally came together, it was with a desperation born of isolation and danger, and the knowledge that they'd chosen each other over everything else. Her strength matched his, her alien grace complementing his human determination. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her tail draped across his legs, his fingers tracing patterns in her fur. 3 days, Syra said again, but this time it sounded like a promise. 3 days, Derek agreed. And then we figure out how 2 fugitives survive in a galaxy that wants us dead. She laughed softly, pressing closer. Together? Together. Outside, the jungle sang its night songs. Inside, 2 beings from different worlds held each other and pretended, just for tonight, that the universe wasn't hunting them. The refugee ship, Meridian's Hope, descended through Sanctuary 7's atmosphere with the grace of something that had made too many dangerous extractions. Derek watched from the ridge beside their shelter, Syra's hand tight in his. 3 days had passed since the facility. 3 days of treatment administrations, careful planning, and stolen moments that made the idea of leaving this hostile world almost bittersweet. Almost. That's them, Syra said, tracking the ship's descent with her ears. They're landing at the clearing coordinates we provided. Derek squeezed her hand. No second thoughts. Hundreds, but none that change what I'm doing. She looked at him, amber eyes steady. You? I'm with you, whatever comes next. They gathered their meager supplies and started the trek to the landing site. The jungle had become almost familiar over the past weeks. Derek knew which plants to avoid, which sounds meant danger, where to step to avoid disturbing the wrong creature. He'd adapted to this death world the same way he'd adapted to having an alien military captain as a lover. By necessity, by choice, by something that felt dangerously close to love. The Meridian's Hope sat in the clearing like a scarred angel, hull plating mismatched from countless repairs. The boarding ramp lowered as they approached, and a figure emerged. Human, female, maybe 50, with gray-streaked hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much. Dr. Ashton, she called. Captain Velrith? That's us, Derek answered. You're Captain Morrison? Yuki Morrison, yes, welcome aboard. Let's get you off this rock before anyone notices we're here. They climbed the ramp into the ship's cargo bay. The crew was small. Morrison, a Kethari engineer who pointedly ignored Syra, a human pilot, and what looked like a medical officer from a species Derek didn't recognize. Refugees helping refugees. The data, Morrison asked. Syra handed over the storage device. Everything from the facility, enough to bury the Kethari military's bioweapons program and implicate a dozen high-ranking officials. Morrison's expression was grim satisfaction. Good. We'll make sure it reaches the right journalists. Galaxy needs to know what was happening out here. And us, Derek asked. You've got passage to Haven Station. After that, you're on your own. We've helped you this far, but we can't protect you from two governments. Morrison's gaze moved between them. You understand what you're facing? The Kethari Expanse will want Captain Velrith's head for treason. The Human Coalition will want yours for collaboration. Neither of you can go home. We know, Syra said quietly. Her hand found Derek's again. Morrison nodded, something almost approving in her expression. Medical bay is down the corridor. Get checked out. We jump to FTL in 20 minutes. The medical officer, a Thessian named Ven, they learned, was thorough and professional. He examined Derek first, pronouncing him remarkably healthy given the circumstances. Then Syra. The treatment is holding, Ven said, studying the scans. But you'll need ongoing doses. The spore exposure caused permanent changes to your immune system. Miss a treatment and the reaction will come back. How long, Syra asked. Indefinitely. You're dependent on this compound now. Ven looked at Derek. You'll need to synthesize it regularly. I can provide the formula, but acquiring the base materials might be challenging depending on where you settle. Derek absorbed that. Another complication, another chain binding them together. He glanced at Syra, saw her jaw tighten. We'll manage, he said. Ven gave them supplies and instructions, then left them alone in the medical bay. The ship shuddered as engines engaged, preparing for the jump to faster-than-light travel. I'm sorry, Syra said quietly. For what? For all of it. Taking you hostage, getting you stranded, ruining your career and your life. Her tail moved in agitated arcs. Now you're stuck synthesizing medicine for me forever because I crashed us on that planet. Derek turned her face toward his. Stop. I made my choices, Syra, every single one. I chose to help you. I chose to find another way to call for rescue. I chose you over going home. He kissed her gently. I'd make the same choices again. Even knowing it means running, hiding, never seeing your family or your work again. Even knowing all of that, he smiled slightly. Besides, I'm a xenobiologist who just spent 3 weeks adapting to a death world with an alien species. That's going to make one hell of a research paper someday. She laughed despite herself, leaning into him. You're insane. Probably, but so are you for trusting a human you kidnapped. Fair point. The ship lurched, and the viewport showed the familiar distortion of FTL entry. Sanctuary 7 vanished behind them, receding into memory. Derek felt something in his chest loosen. They'd survived. Against every odd, they'd made it off that planet alive. Now came the harder part. Morrison found them in the crew quarters hours later. She carried a data pad and the expression of someone delivering bad news. The data hit the networks an hour ago, she said without preamble. Every major news outlet in 3 sectors. The Kethari government is scrambling to deny it, but the evidence is solid. There's already talk of tribunals, sanctions, treaty violations. Good, Syra said. Morrison's expression softened slightly. There's more. The Kethari Expanse has issued an execution order for you, Captain. Treason, desertion, theft of classified materials. They've put a bounty on your head that would make most hunters rich for life. Syra's ears flattened, but she showed no other reaction. Expected. And Dr. Ashton, the Human Coalition has declared you a person of interest in an ongoing investigation. They're calling your relationship with Captain Velrith unnatural collaboration with a hostile foreign power. Morrison's tone made clear what she thought of that assessment. Also expected, Derek said. Morrison handed Syra the data pad. These are identity documents. New names, new backgrounds, enough to get you through most standard checkpoints. Haven Station doesn't ask questions, but once you leave there, you're in open space. My advice, find somewhere remote. Somewhere the major powers don't have much influence, and keep your heads down. Thank you, Derek said. For everything. Thank the galaxy for refugees who remember what it's like to need help. Morrison looked at them both. You did the right thing exposing those weapons. Cost you everything, but it was right. Don't forget that when things get hard. She left them alone with their new identities. Derek studied the documents. According to this, he was now Marcus Webb, independent trader. Syra was listed as Kira Thane, his business partner. Marcus and Kira, Syra said, testing the names. Think we can pull it off? We've survived worse than fake names. She leaned against him, exhaustion finally showing through her military composure. Where do we go, after Haven Station? Derek thought about it. Remote. Somewhere they could disappear, somewhere he could continue his research quietly and synthesize her treatments without attracting attention. I've heard about the Outer Rim colonies, he said. Frontier worlds, mostly independent, always need scientists and people who can solve problems. We could find work there, build something new. Together? Together. Syra was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to face him fully, her hands cupping his face with surprising gentleness. I was trained to see humans as inferior, as tools to be used and discarded. Every moment with you has proven that wrong. You're brilliant and brave and stubborn, and you chose to save me when you could have let me die. Her voice dropped lower. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll survive a year or a decade running from our governments, but I know I want to face it with you. Derek kissed her, pouring everything he couldn't say into the gesture. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Then that's what we'll do. Run together, live together, figure out how to make a life in the spaces between the stars. It won't be easy. Nothing about us has been easy. She smiled at that, real and genuine. Outside the viewport, stars streaked past in the impossible colors of FTL travel. They were heading toward Haven Station, toward an uncertain future as fugitives and lovers. But they were heading there together, two beings from different worlds who'd found something more valuable than duty or country or career. They'd found each other. And that, Derek thought as Syra's tail wrapped around his leg and her head settled against his shoulder, was worth every sacrifice they'd made. The galaxy could hunt them, their governments could condemn them. None of it mattered. They were free,